If you're thinking about buying property in Spain but you don't live here, you might be wondering, can I actually get a Spanish mortgage as a foreigner? And the answer is yes. Foreigners can get mortgages in Spain, but the process isn't necessarily the same as getting a mortgage in your home country. And there are a few things you really need to understand before you start looking at properties. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the process step by step, including what the banks look at, what documents you'll probably need, how much you may be able to borrow, and one of the biggest mistakes I see buyers make. So let's start with the good news. You don't have to be Spanish to get a Spanish mortgage, and you don't necessarily have to be a Spanish resident either. There are mortgages available to non-residents, although the criteria and terms can be different from those available to Spanish residents. And this is really important. Don't assume that because you're earning a good salary, you automatically qualify. The bank will carry out its own assessment of your ability to repay the loan. The Banco de España says lenders assess factors including income, assets, expenses, and existing financial commitments, alongside an appraisal of the property. One of the first things the bank will want to establish is whether you're a resident or non-resident. If you're living in Spain and have your financial life here, you may be treated differently from someone living in the UK, America, Dubai, or somewhere else who is buying a second home in Spain. For non-residents, the bank is essentially looking at your financial situation in another country, so your income, your existing mortgage, loans, credit commitments, and assets all become important. Which brings me to something very important, and this is probably one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you. If you know you're going to need finance, don't spend months looking at properties before finding out what you can actually borrow. Imagine you found your dream villa at 1 million euros, only to discover that the amount you can borrow is significantly lower than you expected. It's much better to understand your approximate borrowing capacity first. Then you know what your real property budget is. So, how much can you borrow? This is where I have to give you the answer that nobody really likes, which is, it depends. There isn't one percentage that applies to every foreign buyer. The amount you can borrow can depend on whether you're resident or non-resident, your income, your financial commitments, the property, and the bank's own lending criteria. As a general rule, you should expect to contribute a significant amount of your own money, particularly as a non-resident. And remember, your deposit isn't necessarily the only cash you'll need. You'll also have the purchase taxes and costs associated with buying the property. The Banco de España stresses that buyers need to consider the total cost of the transaction, not just the mortgage amount and monthly payment. So what does the bank actually want to know about you? Essentially, they want to know, can you afford this mortgage? They're going to look at your income, your existing debts, your regular expenses, your assets, and your overall financial situation. If you're self-employed, retired, employed by a company, or receiving income from investments, the documentation you'll need can be different. The Banco de España confirms that lenders assess income, assets, expenses, and financial commitments as part of this viability assessment. This is where being organized can make your life much easier. The exact documents will depend on the bank and your circumstances, but you should expect to provide evidence of your income and financial position. That could include things such as pay slips, tax returns, bank statements, employment information, details of existing loans and mortgages, evidence of assets, and identification documents. And if you're self-employed, expect the bank to want more information about your business and income history. The important thing is, don't wait until you found the property you want before getting your paperwork together. There's another important part of the process, which is the bank doesn't simply look at the price you've agreed with the seller. The property will normally need to be professionally valued. The valuation helps the bank determine the value of the property being offered as security and therefore the amount it is prepared to lend. So if you've agreed to pay €600,000 for a property, but the valuation comes in lower, that can affect the amount the bank is willing to lend. The appraisal is carried out to help the lender determine how much it can lend. Another important thing to remember is when you're comparing mortgages, don't just look at the headline interest rate. Look at the TAE or APR as well as commissions, fees, and any additional products the bank wants you to take. Sometimes a bank may offer a lower interest rate if you take additional products such as insurance or other services. So you need to work out what the mortgage is actually going to cost you. It is recommended to compare the total cost, including interest, commissions, and other charges, rather than looking only at the headline rate. Once the bank has assessed your application and decides the mortgage is viable, you'll receive something called the FEIN. That's the European Standardized Information Sheet. Think of it as the detailed personalized offer for your mortgage. It sets out the important terms so you can properly understand and compare the offer before signing. The FEIN is a free binding offer containing the key personalized mortgage information. And this isn't something you should just sign without reading. Take the time to understand the interest rate, term, repayments, conditions, and any associated products. Before the mortgage is signed, there's an important role for the Spanish notary. The notary checks that you've received the required information and provides advice on the mortgage documentation. There are also legally required time periods before signing, so don't leave everything until the last minute. Under Spain's mortgage transparency rules, the FEIN and other required information must be provided at least 10 days before signing, and the notary verifies the documentation and advises the borrower. One of the biggest mistakes foreign buyers make is assuming the mortgage is going to be easy before you've actually been assessed. You see buyers fall in love with a property and work backwards from there. It's much better that you establish your financing position first. Know roughly how much you can borrow, know how much cash you're comfortable putting in, understand the purchase costs, and then start seriously looking at properties. So, if you're buying with a mortgage, this is my recommended order of doing things. 1. Work out your budget. 2. Speak to mortgage providers. 3. Get an idea of your borrowing capacity. 4. Prepare your documents. 5. Start looking at properties. 6. Make an offer. 7. Mortgage valuation. 8. Receive and review the formal offer. 9. Notary. And 10. Completion. That way you're not getting your way through the process. So, can you get a mortgage in Spain as a foreigner? The answer is yes. But don't make the mistake of assuming that the process will be identical to getting a mortgage in your home country. The key is preparation. Understand your finances, get your documentation ready, find out what you may be able to borrow, and make sure you understand the total cost of buying before you start making offers. And if you're thinking about buying property in southern Spain, I've also created my Buying Property in Southern Spain framework, which takes you through the buying process from deciding your budget and choosing a location through to making an offer and completing the purchase. I'll leave that linked below. My book is also available on Amazon called Buying Property in the Costa del Sol, which helps guide you through the buying process also. If you're currently looking at buying in Spain, let me know in the comments. Are you planning to buy with cash, or are you going to need a Spanish mortgage? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.